without further ado, bang. Um, so I guess we can start at the bottom. Um, Bama, honorable mention.
Yeah.
I still don't think they're worthy of a top 10. They physically, logistically, metaphorically, spiritually cannot be any higher than Texas.
Yeah.
Texas beat them. They got the same wins and losses. Texas beat them. So at the most, they could be 9.
Yeah.
At the most, and I don't think they're better than Oregon.
No.
I could argue Florida State maybe.
Yeah.
Just because
There's definitely an argument.
we're definitely very out on Florida State. Kind of just kept them in there, just because I didn't feel like it almost
They're
just
still
felt like,
undefeated.
and it just felt maybe a little too early for Louisville. Like great win over
Yeah.
Notre Dame, but maybe the next week, like if they then
Gotcha.
go and stomp somebody else, it's like okay, and Florida State struggles again with somebody, like all right, I can see it. Yeah, you go to Louisville, huge win over Notre Dame, massive win. Um, Pretty much kicked the shit out of them.
Yeah. Ran the ball down their throat for sure.
Yeah, which was pretty crazy. And I saw a video, which I thought this was pretty interesting. I'm gonna pull up just so I can look at it here. The
Mhm.
ACC standings. Okay. Yeah. So since they got rid of there's no Coastal and I forget what the other conference or the other like division was called.
Coastal and Atlantic.
Yeah, there you go. Which is funny because like the Atlantic is that coast, and
Yeah.
then
The Coastal.
like okay, freaking idiots. We couldn't have found anything else. So Louisville doesn't play Florida State or North Carolina this year. Florida State doesn't play Louisville or North Carolina, and obviously North Carolina doesn't play either of those two. So very unlikely, but there is a world where all 3 of those teams go undefeated, and just due to tiebreakers, there's an undefeated ACC team that doesn't even make the ACC championship game because they all never play each other. They could all go undefeated. Obviously, it won't happen. Like somebody's gonna lose in there. They'll
Yeah.
probably all lose once. Like Louisville's gonna play Duke, Miami, Kentucky. They'll probably drop one. Florida State, they're just begging to drop a game.
Yeah.
Um, and then North Carolina they're gonna play Miami next, and they'll play Duke. But all of them have relatively easy-ish schedules, so like there
Mhm.
is a world. But I just thought that was pretty crazy that there could be an undefeated ACC team that doesn't even make their conference championship just due to how the schedules were.
No, and that I didn't even follow that from the off season, but I'm just looking at the Florida State schedule because I'm with you. I'm out on Florida State. I really think they're gonna drop a game here soon. Um, I mean, they got Syracuse at home next week, which I mean,
Should be a win.
it should be, but I feel like it's gonna be a close win, like a
That Duke
21-17
game should be tough.
if Riley's
And
back.
then at Wake Forest, at Pitt, you just never know. You'll play Miami, at Florida. Like they're gonna lose to somebody.
Yeah,
I just
it could
think that
be.
like their win now over LSU just doesn't look good at all. LSU is not very good. Their defense is horrible.
Yeah,
That win at Clemson doesn't even like Clemson just struggled with, wasn't it Wake Forest?
yeah, I think so. Let me check it.
I think they just played yeah, 17 to
Yep.
12 at home against Wake Forest. Like that's a crappy win. Like they don't look good either. And then almost lose to
Yeah,
Boston College, who is barely beating like Army. Like
yeah,
they're not good, okay? I don't care what anybody says. They're not very good. And before everyone is like, "Well, USC it just barely lost." This is the first time. Even the Colorado game wasn't really that close. It was 41-14 at one point, and it got like kind of fake
slowly.
close late. Like all right, you score and then onside kick, that type of close. All the other games have been pretty much blowouts. Arizona State was a weird game, but not necessarily one. Like before the game yesterday or on Saturday, USC was the only team in the country who hasn't trailed at any point throughout the year.
I saw that
So
stat.
that's why. Florida State, on the other hand, has had multiple close games against teams that are not good.
Yeah,
And now their quote unquote good win, who people were saying was a great win. LSU's nothing really.
yeah,
They're a 2-loss team that probably shouldn't even be ranked.
yeah.
So that's why
I
we
agree.
have them at 10. But I'll just jump back to the other 4. Pac teams just because I wanted to put all of them in there, and when I say the 4, it's, Oregon State, Utah, UCLA, Washington State. Like, they all have 1 loss. Oregon State beat, Utah, Utah beat UCLA, UCLA beat Washington State, Washington State beat Oregon State. So it's just a mess.
Yeah.
So we put them all in there. It'll sort itself out eventually. One of them will come out still with 1 loss, another one will come out with 3 losses, and then you just move on. They're just not in the same caliber as the top 3 of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
But I just figured they should all get at least a mention.
Yeah. No, 100%. You throw them in the blender, see
Yeah.
which one comes out with the 1 loss, and
Mhm.
move on. We actually had a pretty interesting discussion about Louisville. I was kind of on the same train. I thought they deserved it over Florida State, but I mean, Florida State is still undefeated, so
Yeah.
until they prove us right and
It's
drop
tough
a
to
game,
really
they gotta stay up
drop a
there.
team that far when they're
Yeah.
still undefeated. Like, you gotta give them the benefit of the doubt. Same thing with SC.
Mhm.
Like, they're gonna drop, obviously, but, like, end of the day, you still win, so it's kinda hard for me to drop you
Yeah.
behind a team that has lost. That was
100%.
my thing with, like, Florida State. It's like, am I really gonna then put Bama over them or all these Pac-12 teams? Now, I feel like if Florida State played that little group of 4 Pac teams, we
I
go
think they
2
might come
and
out 2 and 2.
2 and 2 maybe, like, so it's hard to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, Florida State drops, um, couple I think they were 8. Yeah, and they dropped 2 because
Mhm.
Oregon stayed the same, and then obviously big jump up for Oklahoma, and then Texas, big fall off. But yeah, Oregon didn't play, so they just chill.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a huge game this weekend coming up, Oregon against Washington. It's gonna be
Can't wait.
massive, probably the biggest game of the year. I would say this game is bigger than, I mean, not bigger than Red River just because that's like a big, but like just I think these 2 teams are better than Texas and Oklahoma. Like if you just do a combined rating or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be wild.
No, I agree. I'm looking forward to it, especially seeing the Pac-12 kind of show out a little bit. Like, so
Mhm.
a lot of people on the East Coast, I don't think I've seen Washington or Oregon because most of their games, at least for
Yeah,
Washington, are kind of later in the day.
you're gonna see now.
Um, yeah, Penix, he can sling that rock, man.
I
That
almost
guy.
want I hope that they like we've gotten some stick for having Washington at 1 for a while now. They haven't really done anything for me to justify moving them down, and other teams haven't really done anything to jump them. This is the week. Either we're gonna like look like Stooges,
Yeah,
saying, "Oh
no,
yeah, of course they were never that good," or they're gonna
no
beat
doubt.
Oregon, and everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, okay, like this team's real," and
Yeah,
they won't move from number 1 for the next couple weeks unless they get upset by somebody.
but we won't hear in our mentions, "Hey, you were right." That will never
Never.
happen.
When they
So
say, "Wow,
we're either, yeah,
you guys were right about Washington. They are pretty good now." You're gonna be like, "Of course, Washington
yeah,
was shit the whole
yeah,
time."
yeah.
Yeah. I guess we'll move up to Texas. Tough loss, so of course they gotta be lower than Oklahoma, who's now undefeated. I dabbled with keeping them ahead of SC. I also dabbled with putting them under Oregon, but I think Oregon didn't play anybody, so, like, it would be hard for me, like, we had Texas at 2. Be hard for me to drop a team more than 6 spots when they play a tough rivalry game, so I felt like 8 was kinda fair with
Yeah,
the thought of, okay, if Oregon wins, they're obviously gonna go ahead of Texas anyway, so it's kinda gonna sort itself out
yeah.
in a week. If they played, feel like Texas neutral field could beat Oregon. It's close. It's a 50-50. Their D-line is still very good. We just haven't seen Oregon really in a battle. They still, I mean, that game against Texas Tech still kinda
Yeah, that still
freaks
sits
it
in the
still
back of your
freaks me
head.
out a little bit for some reason. They did smack Colorado, but
See,
yeah, it's very tight for me from, like, for now after the games this weekend from 6 to, like, 12. Oklahoma
yeah,
and down. I think Penn State and up are all the teams who have consistently
showed
handled
out.
business, like, Georgia a little less so, but they kind of just by default are kind of climbing with the way the other teams are kind of dropping.
Yeah.
But especially like Ohio State's still a good win. Doesn't look as good now. We'll get to that. But like from 6 down, I feel like obviously Texas is going to always have to be under Oklahoma. But if you wanted to put USC at 9 and Oregon at 7 and Texas at 10 and Alabama at 10
I
or
could see the
Louisville,
argument.
like I could, I'm not really gonna like, I wouldn't argue too much with anybody. Like I've seen some people say SC should be like 16th. I'm like, okay, like, all right, chill
Relax.
out
Okay.
a
Like,
little bit. All right, like that's
take a second.
so you're gonna just rank them lower than other Pac-12 teams that have one loss. Cool story, bro. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of comes down to that factor. And I thought it was over after the BCS era of like they used to call it style points, where you had to win by a ton. But that was because you had to help like fight with the algorithm. It had to be like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you have like 120 points
Yeah,
to
you
you,
beat
so
this team
therefore,
by
yeah.
this much, so it matters. Yeah, now it shouldn't
But it's still
matter,
pointed.
but it kind of does to the casuals out there. Like, well, all right,
Yep,
tough win. Like, and it'll affect rankings, but like,
not that
it
much. Like,
shouldn't as much.
relax.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
mean, we dropped what we had USC at 4
we had
last week.
USC at 4, and they're down to 7.
Yeah, I mean,
So
we
in the actual
dropped them.
AP, they went from 9 to 10, but the
I
week
saw that
before that, after the Colorado game, they went from 5
5 to like
to 8 or 5
8.
to 9. They dropped
It was
like
5 to
4
8.
spots after winning. After winning a game where they were leading 41-14, and I was like, "Geez, all right, people are just hating." Like they're at a lower rank right now when they were undefeated. Like when they, I'm gonna find this. When they lost last year to Utah, I'm gonna find it.
You're talking the first time or the second time?
I'm talking the first time.
Okay.
I'm gonna go back to their schedule. So going into that Utah game, they were ranked. Find it. Let's find it. They were ranked number 7. No, maybe that was the week before. Hold on. They were ranked number 6.
Mhm.
No, they were ranked 7. They were ranked 7. And then after, they dropped after a loss, they dropped to 10. They're at 10 right now and they're undefeated. So I feel like people
Yeah.
are like going a little too overboard. Like they lost a tough game to Utah last year. Utah went for 2. Caleb didn't really get a chance to equalize. They only dropped to 10 versus they're winning games, still undefeated, and they're dropping to 10. They're treating it as if they're losing. So it's a little interesting to me. Kind of just, I think that's due to, again, people
East
living
Coast
in
bias.
that and people living in last year.
Yeah.
Like they saw what USC was last year, so now they're seeing kind of the same stuff. So they're like, okay, we just have to drop them. When you kind of just have to look, you can't look at what was happening last year. You have to just look at this year and like you're going to drop them the same amount as when they were losing. Like, I don't know. It just seems weird to me.
No, I agree with it. Yeah, I think it's a little interesting. Again, like we just said, like you're winning your games, but you're still dropping. It's like, I mean, that's a little odd to me.
Yeah. But, well, we can talk a little bit about SC. This is kind of when
Mhm.
they got everything ahead of them.
Oh boy.
At Notre Dame, home against Utah, at Cal, which is still a sneaky tough game, home against Washington, at Oregon, home against UCLA. I mean,
It's a gauntlet.
realistically, you get through Cal and you're still undefeated, which means you went and beat Notre Dame. They're going to be very fired up. They just had a tough loss to Louisville, so they're going to give you a game. Utah's always a tough one. We'll see if Rising is playing. I don't even know what's up with that. At Cal is just like a trap game, I feel like, before the Washington game. But even when you get to the last 3 games, if you can come out of there 2-1 against Washington, Oregon, UCLA, that means you're in the Pac-12 championship game, and if you win the Pac-12 championship with 1 loss, more than likely you're in the playoff. Same story from last year.
Yeah.
So
Same
if you can
script.
end 5-1, you're good. Now, if you drop 2, you're probably dead, at least
Yeah.
for the playoff. You can drop 2 and maybe
Get the
still
Cotton Bowl.
be, but you could even drop 2 and maybe you're still in the conference championship game. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
how it'll work out. Everyone's losing to everybody. You could still get in there. But if you want the playoff, last 6 games, you gotta go
5 and 1.
5-1, and then you gotta win the conference championship, and then you'll probably get in. So, yeah,
There you
we'll
have it.
see. We'll
There's a
see.
blueprint.
There you
Yeah.
go. We'll go to Oklahoma. Huge win. We kinda talked about it already, though, but They jumped from it was good on us to put them in the honorable mentions last week just because we knew it was a big game. So now it makes us look like, oh, okay, we thought they were pretty good.
We used a little bit of
So
this,
they
you
just
know?
fly up to 6. Obviously, they got to be ranked ahead of Texas.
Yeah.
Big win. I couldn't really justify myself putting them ahead of these other 5 teams just because kind of just one big rivalry win, and the rest of their games have kind of just been playing either horrible teams or just kind of like not looking great. But they have a very favorable schedule, so they can just fly up the board if they just keep winning.
Yeah.
Um, Penn State stays the same. They didn't play. Kind of unlucky for them that these other teams jumped them, but I think that's more to do with finally Georgia annihilated somebody how they were supposed to. Um, which was good. Now Penn State and Ohio State games coming up in not this week, I think next week. So that can
Okay.
shake itself out. Um, I still think I could maybe now 1 through Washington's my 1 until they lose, but 2, 3, 4, and 5, I wouldn't be mad if you put them in any order. I would say Michigan kinda has to be ahead of Georgia. I feel like they've just handled business more often. So I would say out of 2 through 5, Michigan's the best one, but if you put Penn State at 3, I wouldn't be mad. Um,
Well, I think that question's gonna get answered in 2 weeks.
yeah. Is
So
that
Penn
Ohio
State's gonna
State, Penn
play
State?
Ohio State.
Yeah, and we'll know. And
It's
that
at
Ohio
Ohio State.
State win over Notre Dame's looking a little less and less glamorous, um, which is why Michigan jumps them. Even though they don't have a signature win, they've kinda just battered they've had some slow first halves, but they've gotten after pretty much everybody they've played against, and Ohio State kinda just, um I don't know, were they 3? Maybe I put the green arrow by mistake. I don't know if they were 4. No, I think they were 3 last week, so I think they stayed the same. Ignore the green arrow there. I'm pretty sure that they were 3 because SC was 4 and
Yeah.
Texas was 2. Um,
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
they yeah, they move
Oh,
ahead of Texas, I guess, but that's just Texas drops, but Michigan up to 2, and then
well,
we've
number 1
talked a lot
stays the
about
same.
Washington. This is the week. If they win, they stay. If they lose, like, what are the next few big games for a
Well, we actually get the question that we
Michigan?
want answered with Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State because
They're all
Penn
playing each
State,
other.
yeah, plays
Yeah,
Ohio State in 2 weeks, and then in November they play Michigan. So
yeah,
it'll get answered,
it'll happen.
sort itself out.
Yeah, when does Michigan? Yeah, Michigan. We won't know what Michigan is until November 11th at Penn State, big noon kickoff. Then we'll know. But until
Yeah,
then, unless someone else is losing, I just can't justify myself putting them at 1.
no, I haven't
Especially
seen enough from them.
if Washington beats Oregon, Washington's at 1 until they lose. Michigan can't there's nothing they can do until November 11th that would, in my mind, put them ahead of Washington for me if Washington wins this game against Oregon
Yeah,
and continues to win until the 11th. Now, Washington's schedule, obviously, just because they're in the Pac-12, is going to get crazy too. Not as crazy, actually. So they play Oregon, then they get a ASU and a Stanford,
mhm,
which is not too bad. Then on the 4th, this will be the big game. They're at USC. So the week before Michigan takes on Penn State, Washington could then drop. But at that point, if SC's undefeated, they might be up there. So like
find their way back.
that's why it's just hard for me to like I know a lot of people that say, "Yeah, Michigan should be higher." And it's like you're just those people are projecting, which I don't mind, but it's like as of now, they've
Washington's been
annihilated
the best team.
they've annihilated shitty teams.
Congratulations.
They've second half annihilated shitty teams. Like first half, like they were losing to Bowling Green at one point, or it was 7-6 or whatever it was. Like
Yeah,
it was kind of a weirdly close game, like 24-10 at half against Minnesota. So just like kind of like and then they just pull away.
yeah. No, I agree with you. I think Washington has shown they're the best team in football right now. They're gonna have to prove it against Oregon. If they beat Oregon, they're staying.
They're staying.
Simple as that.
No doubt in my mind.
Yeah,
Won't convince me otherwise.
never. Don't even try. It's not worth your time. Well,